I want to talk about why we only see stars in the nighttime and why we cannot see stars in the daytime. And this is another follow-up video to my inverted world in which we live in series. And so basically, just to get you guys caught up, we are living in the inside surface of the Earth, and the entire universe is contained within the Earth. Earth is just a shell, and it's stationary. It doesn't move, okay? So you have the continents and the land formations and the oceans on the inside surface, okay? At 100 kilometers, or roughly thereabout, there is a glass ceiling to the sky. There's much evidence that the sky actually has a literal glass ceiling, and attached to this glass ceiling is a layer of ice. So this is actually exaggerated here, but I just want to notify which is which. So if we have glass at the top of the sky at 100 kilometers, then there's also a mantle of ice. So there's a sheet of ice there as well. And the sun and the moon are orbiting around the inside of the Earth. Okay, so I'm going to get my circular template here, and I will just draw for you. Okay, so we'll have like the intercelestial sphere, and that's actually, it's darkened so you cannot see what's behind it, which I believe there is a pyramidal structure, a magnetic core to the center of the Earth. However, it's up above. The center of the Earth is above, not below. So this area here would be the inner space. So this is where all the satellites and the space shuttle and the planets and the sun and the moon orbit. It's not outer space, it's inner space. Okay? So, obviously, I didn't complete the circle here, but it's implied here. So, if you have the sun moving around inner space, you also have the moon, too. But sun, moon. What's happening is there's a transition, because this ice, it transitions between crystalline to amorphous. Now, amorphous ice is generally considered ice that is like glass. It has no lattice structure. It's like a continual. It's like glass. It's like a continual medium. There's no lattices. There's no crystallizing of the ice. So that's generally that would be more of a transparent, like glass, basically. The amorphous ice. Now the crystalline ice would be more opaque, not totally opaque. I would say translucent. And the way in which they transition between the two is due to temperature change and pressure change. So what I'm saying is that we only see the stars at nighttime, right? So therefore, the ice at the top of the glass sky is transparent, amorphous ice. Okay? So obviously it's a cooler temperature, right? So and it's slowly cooling, okay, as the sun is moving away, okay? Let's say this is nighttime right now, and that would mean the sun is over here. If this was nighttime over here, and so the sun would be away from us, and so it's not as warm. Okay, so this ice is colder than if the sun was over here. Okay, so there's a transition that happens daily. It fluctuates daily between crystalline and amorphous. So when the sun is over here in the daytime, it changes, and the ice changes into crystalline, and it becomes transparent. Okay, so it's blocking out a lot of the light, and that's why the stars are up here in the celestial sphere. That's why we can't see the stars, because of the translucent crystalline ice that changes daily. Okay, now this solves the mystery. There's a mystery where scientists cannot figure out where these ice chunks are coming from. They call them mega cryometeors. this solves the mystery, okay? Because if you do a little research, you'll find out that most of the time that these megacriometeors that they find are fallen in the daytime, and they are translucent. They are not clear. They're not transparent, usually. Okay, so that gives credence to the fact that that is why the ice transitions to a crystalline ice, because it's in the daytime and the sun is generating heat. It's heating it up. It's changing it. It's changing the crystals into a lattice structure, and it's becoming non-transparent. And I also believe there's a pressure change as well. I'm not really sure, but I think that the lower the pressure would create the amorphous ice. So you have, switch that. So you have higher pressure and you have lower temperature for the amorphous ice. And for the crystalline ice, you have lower pressure and higher temperature. And during the nighttime, it is usually the atmosphere, the barometric pressure is usually higher during the nighttime. So that would give credence to that transition. Okay, so I quoted Job, chapter 38, verse 30 actually, where it says, actually go back to verse 29, where it says, out of whose womb came the ice? Okay, so we're talking about a womb, so something in some kind of encasement. So that alludes to the fact that there's a glass/ice womb or encasement up in the sky. And the hoary frost of heaven, that's another term, the hoary frost of heaven, in Hebrew that translates to something of a bowl-like structure or a basin. So that gives credence to the fact that this is a bowl, a basin. It's a hollowed out, curved surface in which this ice is coming from. So verse 29 goes on to say, who hath gendered it? And then verse 30 it says, the waters are hid as with a stone. Okay. Initially I thought this was interpreted differently. However, now I understand that the waters that are hid as with a stone, they're talking about opaqueness, basically, or translucency. So the light you can still see the sunlight through this translucent ice, but you cannot see the stars, okay? And the face of the deep is frozen. Now the deep here doesn't mean down below, it means up above. That's the deep. This is the face of the deep, so it's frozen. So that is why we only see stars at nighttime, because there's a transition process that takes place daily from crystalline ice to amorphous ice, from translucent to transparent, as the sun revolves around the inside of the earth. Okay? Thank you for listening. Okay, a couple things I want to talk about is the fictitious force that you have learned about. A fictitious force of gravity. Gravity is a fictitious force, okay? What you've learned is that you think, okay, they tell you that gravitational pull, at the center of a mass attracts other objects. Well, that's not true. The only reason they believe that is because they believe that the Earth is convex, and they believe that the center of the Earth there's a magnetic core to the center of the Earth. Well, actually, there's a magnetic core to the center of the Earth, but it's not down below; it's up above. As I told you before, it's in the center of heaven, which is in the center of Earth, and it does have a magnetic core. And it is emanating magnetic fields throughout the inside of the Earth, and it also is emanating toward the sun too. So the sun is a conduit for that magnetic force. The only reason they, okay, and then they say, oh, they'll conclude that, okay, like Jupiter has moons, right? And the moons are being attracted by Jupiter by the gravitational pull. That's not true. That's electromagnetic pull. Another thing they'll misapply gravity to is tides. It's not the so-called gravitational pull of the moon that attracts or that causes the water to rise. Okay, in this system, the true system that you live in, Earth is stationary and there is ether, otherwise known as luminiferous. Now, this luminiferous ether was actually kind of discarded when Michelson-Morley conducted experiments, and they detected that there was no interference pattern between shooting different light rays at different locations and having it reach a target at the same time. That's because they were under the faulty presupposition that the Earth was spinning. There is no spin to the Earth. Okay. If there's no spin to the Earth, then something's got to be spinning, because we see the stars and the moon and the sun move across the sky. So it's actually the stars, not everything inside the Earth, every celestial orb that you see in the sky, that's what's moving inside the Earth. And so this ether, it pushes the force downward. It's the same thing. It's also applied to pressure, barometric pressure. The greatest pressure, the greatest density is toward the inside surface. Greatest pressure. And what you know about barometric pressure is that when the barometric pressure is low, okay, let's say this is the ground, okay, so you got the mountains here, and you got oceans here. Okay, this would be a continent. You have the oceans, and you have the clouds. If you have cloud cover, what the clouds are doing is they are absorbing the pressure, so they're causing a low pressure system. If you look at a weatherman, they have a bunch of L's and H's all over their boards. Well, that's because the clouds are causing a relief in pressure. So you get a low. If you have high pressure, it's usually on a clear day where there's no cloud cover. That's the same thing with the moon. If the moon is here, okay, it's causing a relief. That's what's causing the water to rise, because low pressure, low barometric pressure is at high tide. And high barometric pressure is at low tide. That's how it works. It's all in the Earth. It's a pressurized system, a pressurized container. So you no longer need to apply this so-called force of gravity. See, what it is it's not the force of gravity that's holding you to the ground. It's the force of the ether, the barometric force. It's pushing you to the ground. And objects with heavier densities, like say if you had a block of lead and you had a block of wood. Well, the density in the molecules of the wood is not as dense as the lead, okay? There's more mass here because the ether is pushing down, okay? This was the ground. And it's filtering through the wood easier than it is the lead. That's how it works here, okay? The higher you go, right? If you're here up on the Rocky Mountains here, you weigh less because there's less pressure. There's less barometric pressure. There's less etheric pressure. So this whole thing about gravity is bullshit. It's a fictitious force. Everything is pressurized in the system, okay? The main force is magnetic and ether. So this ether, what it does is there's a greater resistance here. There's a greater force around objects with higher densities. So the ether is generating more energy to keep it down. Okay, another reason why gravity is fictitious, there's a guy called Bruce De Palma, and he conducted this spinning pinball, basically, and he put it in a cup, basically, okay? And then there's two balls, basically. One is spinning, I think it was at 2,700 RPM, I'm not sure if that's the right speed, but one was spinning and the other was stationary. And he was using a drill to spin this, but then he lifted the two balls off the cup simultaneously, pushed them up, and what he found out was that the ball that spun, it traveled higher than the ball that did not spin when they were lifted with the same force. So basically what's happening is that within the ether here, okay, the ball that is spinning, the etheric pressure is being twisted, kind of like it's not being applied fully onto the spinning object. So there's less resistance to the ether for spinning objects as opposed to the ball that was stationary, because the ether is just hitting it straight on. But here, as the ball is rising, the ether is not hitting the ball straight on, it's kind of going around the ball. Another thing about people brought up questions about, well, okay, then how do lunar eclipses happen within the Earth? Well, that's very easy. It's not the shadow of the Earth that's covering the moon. It's basically what I told you before, is that the sunlight is bending around the inside of the Earth, okay? So if this is the sun, let's put the moon over here now. See, the sunlight bends around like that, and that's what illuminates a full moon, okay? It's bending around both sides. However, what it does is it creates this little area. It's like a little funnel-shaped void of light. So as that moon passes through that void area, that area of darkness, it gets eclipsed. That's how lunar eclipses really happen.